The slap landed before I even finished the sentence. It wasn't loud, not really, but the sting bloomed sharp across my cheek, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Lennox's hand trembled slightly, like even she didn't expect herself to do it. Or maybe she did, and she liked it. Eamon stood just behind her suitcase in hand, eyes glued to the floor like a scolded child. I didn't move. Not at first. Outside, the neighbors' wind chimes stirred in the breeze. My front door was still wide open, and I saw Mrs. Rowan across the street, frozen halfway up her porch steps, keys dangling in her hand. Lennox's voice came out sharp and breathless. "We are moving in Callista. You're not going to strand your own son over a misunderstanding." I touched my cheek, slowly, fingers brushing the heat she left behind. "You hit me," I said. Not a question. Just the fact sitting between us like an open wound. Eamon still didn't speak. She stepped forward again, heels clicking against my tile like she owned the ground beneath her. "You think you're the victim here? You should be grateful we came to you instead of ending up on the street." "Grateful," I repeated, my voice low. "We lost everything." She continued. "The business gone. The housing market collapsed. We've been betrayed by investors, by banks, and now by you. You sold your house for $620,000, I said evenly. "That's not losing everything. That's burning it." Lennox scoffed and waved her hand. "Don't act like you understand investments." "I understand loans," I replied. "I remember the $45,000 I gave you. I remember Eamon's signature. And I remember how you both promised to pay it back when you sold the house." Eamon finally looked up. "Mom." "No," I said, quiet but firm. "You don't get to soften it now." He opened his mouth again, then closed it like the words cost too much. Like standing up to Lennox was harder than watching his mother take a slap. Lennox stared at me. Her tone changed, cold-cutting. "You don't want to do this. You don't want to turn this into a war." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Then get out of my kitchen." She stood still for a beat too long. Then she grabbed her suitcase, stomped to the door, and flung it open. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. She stormed out to the car, slamming the trunk shut, as Eamon trailed behind her, shoulders hunched. He paused at the threshold, looked back at me with something that might have been shame or fear. "Just give us a few days to figure things out," he said. "I already did," I answered, 3 years ago. And then I shut the door. I stood in the quiet kitchen alone, the shape of her hand still pressed into my skin. I could smell her perfume on the air, too strong and cloying, clinging to my walls like a warning. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I walked to the drawer by the fridge, the one where I kept old warranties and expired coupons. Beneath the clutter, I pulled out a plastic folder. Inside, the signed loan agreement notarized with Eamon's signature clear as day. I'd forgotten it was still here. I turned the page. On the back, in James Kessler's handwriting, was the clause he'd added at my request. I closed the folder, poured myself a cup of cold coffee from this morning's pot, and carried it to the porch. Mrs. Rowan was still standing on her steps. I raised the mug slightly in greeting. She nodded once, solemn and slow, and went inside. Tomorrow I'd call James, but tonight I sat with the silence and let it settle. The listing was still online. I sat at my kitchen table the next morning, coffee warm this time, my laptop glowing with a grainy image of their old house, white siding, slate roof. The porch I helped repaint 2 summers ago. The asking price had been $615,000. But the closing report said $620,000 sold within 3 days, cash buyer. No mortgage, no contingency, no moving truck either. They sold fast, moved faster, and came here without saying a word. Not even a warning. I stared at the number like it might change if I blinked enough. My hand hovered over the mouse as I scrolled down. The buyer was a trust, anonymous, likely an investor. And just like that, the house I'd helped them buy with $45,000 from my retirement fund no longer belonged to them or to any version of the future we'd once imagined. I texted Eamon. Where did the money go? He didn't reply. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Not him. Lennox. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the third call, I answered. Not because I wanted to hear her voice, but because I needed to hear what she'd say under pressure. You don't get to interrogate us, she snapped before I could speak. That money was ours. The house was in our name, and $45,000 of it was mine, I said. She laughed. You're really going to nickel and dime us over a gift. You signed a repayment clause. Your husband signed it in front of a notary. Her voice flattened. Eamon's too soft. That's why we're in this mess. You sold the house. Where's the money? There was a pause just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. Then she exhaled like I was the problem. The boutique needed capital, she said. The real estate market in Bend is exploding. I needed a storefront before someone else grabbed it. I remembered her Instagram post from last month. Glass windows, soft lighting, white orchids in the corner. That boutique. Yes, she snapped. And branding isn't cheap. We hired a consultant. We built a collection. I needed inventory photography, a stylist. Is it licensed? Another pause. We're working on that. I closed my eyes. How much did you spend? $312, including marketing. What about the rest? Living expenses. Debt. Whose debt? Mine. Marjorie's. She had to get out of her lease. Her landlord was abusive. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. You gave your sister part of the house sale? She's family. And I'm what, Lennox? She didn't answer. I kept my voice steady. You spent over $500,000 in under 4 months. You didn't pay off the loan. You didn't ask to stay in my home. And you slapped me. You're being dramatic. You're being evicted from my life. She scoffed. Then her tone turned icy. You won't win in court. You're just a bitter old woman playing banker. I hung up. A minute later, my phone buzzed. A text from Eamon. I didn't know everything. I'm sorry. Just give me a chance to fix it. I stared at the screen. The words felt hollow, but the guilt read loud and clear. I typed one line, you have 30 days. Then I file. I turned off the phone, took my mug to the sink, and pulled the folder back out from the drawer. This time, I looked past the loan document. Receipts, transfers, bank drafts. James had told me to keep everything just in case. I never thought I'd use them. But I would. 3 years ago, they stood in this same kitchen, freshly engaged, grinning like they'd already won the world. We found the perfect place, Eamon said, flipping his laptop toward me. 3 bedrooms, fenced yard, good schools. It's a steal. Lennox leaned on the counter, sipping iced coffee like she owned the house already. We just need help with the down payment. Temporarily. How much? I asked. 45, Eamon said. We've saved 10, but the seller's asking for 15% to avoid PMI. They spoke fast rehearsed. Lennox even had a spreadsheet. Closing costs, projected equity, rental potential if they ever moved. It looked professional on the surface. You've talked to a lender? Yes, she said. They're ready to go once we submit the funds. I didn't say yes right away. That night I lay awake thinking about my savings account. The number wasn't huge, but it was stable. I'd built it quietly over years of double shifts over time and saying no to myself. It wasn't just about the money. It was what came next. Expectations. Dependence. Entitlement disguised as gratitude. So I called James Kessler the next morning. Loan it if you want, he said. But protect yourself. Paper it. Notarize it. Put repayment terms and a default clause. Lennox had rolled her eyes when I mentioned it. Oh, come on, Callista, she said. It's family. This is just a formality, right? That's exactly what it is, I replied. A formality that keeps everyone honest. She signed it anyway, begrudgingly, her tone tight. Eamon added his name after her, not looking me in the eye. We had it notarized that same day at the UPS store down the road. Lennox didn't speak the entire drive back. For a while they made payments, small ones, sporadic, 200 here, 100 there, always with excuses, car trouble, job changes, medical bills. I didn't push. Eventually, the payment stopped. When I brought it up, Lennox waved her hand like I was talking about an expired coupon. That was years ago, she said. And you said it wasn't urgent. Don't guilt us for building a life. I let it go. Not because I forgot. Because I wanted peace. I had no idea that my silence would one day be weaponized against me. But now, sitting with the folder open and the signed document in my hands, I felt nothing but clarity. Loan amount $45,000. Repayment starts 6 months after closing. Interest 4% fixed. Default clause full repayment plus legal costs. Signed Eamon J. Fenn Lennox Vale. I flipped to the back and found James's handwriting from the day he'd reviewed it. Valid in Oregon, admissible, enforceable. 3 years ago, this paper had meant nothing to them. But now it was leverage. I slid the document into a new folder marked active, added a copy of the house sale deed, and zipped it all into an envelope for James. When I sealed it, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt exhausted. But it was the kind of exhaustion that comes before a storm. Because once James saw the numbers, I knew what he'd say. I used to think staying quiet was a form of love. In the years after Eamon left for college, I made myself small for the sake of peace. When Lennox first came around, sharp-tongued, fast-talking, always performing, I told myself she just needed time. She was raised different, more confident, less soft. When she talked over me, I smiled. When she rolled her eyes at my advice, I laughed it off. When she forgot my birthday twice in a row, I told Eamon not to make a fuss. She's busy, I'd said. Young people don't keep calendars anymore. But the truth is, I noticed everything. The clipped greetings. The inside jokes I wasn't part of. The way she called me Callista instead of Mom, even after they got married. I swallowed every slight like it was mine to manage. The first Thanksgiving after their wedding, I offered to host. Eamon said yes, but Lennox insisted they'd do it at their condo downtown. She sent me a time and address like it was a corporate memo. When I arrived, the table was set for 6, but there were 7 of us. Lennox looked surprised to see me with a pie in hand. "Oh," she said. "We weren't sure if you were actually coming. No seat, no plate." I stood there holding a pie, no one touched. I didn't argue. I stood, smiled, made a joke about traffic, and offered to help in the kitchen. They gave me a folding chair. I ate mashed potatoes in the corner, while Lennox's parents got the full spread on china I'd given Eamon for his first apartment. After dinner, I rode home in silence, told myself not to make trouble. Eamon had looked tired, stretched thin. I didn't want to add to it. And that became the pattern. Her snide remarks became background noise, her dismissals routine. I kept showing up with casseroles and soft smiles, hoping consistency would count for something. It didn't. What it did, what I see now, is it taught them I wouldn't push back. It taught them they could use my house like a hotel. It taught them they could spend my money and forget the debt. It taught them I was safe to betray. When Lennox slapped me, she didn't flinch afterward. That's what stayed with me. Not the sting, not Eamon's silence, but her certainty. She hit me because she assumed there would be no consequence. And why wouldn't she? I had never raised my voice. Never drawn a boundary. Never given her a reason to believe I had limits. I sipped from my coffee and stared out the window at the bird feeder Eamon built when he was 12. A squirrel had chewed through the side. The paint was flaking off. It looked like what it was, something once cared for, now forgotten. I reached for the phone and called James. I've got everything I said, the note, the sale documents, and receipts. He didn't ask why I waited. He didn't need to. I'm coming by the office tomorrow, I added. It's time. His voice didn't change. I'll have the paperwork ready. When I hung up, I placed the phone face down on the table. The folder sat beside it untouched since yesterday. But this time, I didn't just look at it. I picked it up and began to prepare a second copy. James Kessler didn't ask for the whole story. He didn't need the drama or the emotion, just the facts. I placed the folder on his desk and sat down across from him, smoothing my palms against my skirt. He opened the folder without a word, pulled out the promissory note, and scanned the page. Then he flipped it over where he'd written the clause in his own careful handwriting 3 years ago. When he looked up, his expression didn't change. It's valid, he said. Enforceable. Actionable. I nodded once, already knowing, but it still hit different, hearing it spoken like a verdict. You kept everything he asked. Receipts. Venmo transfers, text messages, I said. Even the check stub from the day I wired the money. He gave a small, approving hum, flipped to the back of the folder, and tapped a few lines with his pen. They stopped payments completely 2 years ago. Last one was $150. Then silence. And they sold the property without repaying you. I didn't answer. He already knew. James leaned back, his fingers steepled in thought. Technically, they defaulted the moment they closed escrow. You have full right to demand immediate repayment with interest. I'll run the numbers, but it's close to 67, maybe 70,000 now. I took a breath. What's the first step? A demand letter, formal notice. I'll give them 10 business days to respond. If they ignore it, we escalate to a civil suit. We'll file a lien on Lennox's boutique if it exists and freeze any accounts we can link to the house sale. They said the boutique was real, I said. But I don't think it's licensed. James raised an eyebrow. Even better. If it's operating under false pretenses, I can bring in a business fraud angle. She won't enjoy that. He flipped open his laptop and began typing the letter. The keys clicked steadily under his fingers, fast and calm. I watched him work, and something strange happened. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't even feel angry. I felt steady, anchored. Maybe it was because for once I wasn't being spoken over. I wasn't being smiled at condescendingly or dismissed as emotional. I was just being taken seriously. James printed the letter and slid it across the desk. You want to send it certified or hand-delivered? Certified, I said. Let her sign for it. He nodded. We'll file it today. Expect her to lash out. I already got the slap, I said, voice dry. He cracked a small smile. Then all she's got left is the panic. I stood and gathered my things. My fingers brushed over the top of the folder again. Thank you, I said. Callista James said gently, Don't thank me yet. They're going to make this loud. I looked him in the eye. I've lived through quiet. I'll take loud. When I got back home, the message was already waiting. Lennox. 2 voicemails, both short. The second one ended mid-sentence like she'd thrown the phone. And then came the text from Eamon. What did you do, Mom? I deleted it without replying. Then I checked the mailbox. The certified envelope hadn't even arrived yet. The motel was 3 blocks off the highway, tucked behind a gas station and a shuttered diner. I knew it without being told. Lennox had once referred to it as the place where dreams go to die when we passed it during a holiday drive. I suppose irony has its own cruel timing. Eamon called 2 days after the letter arrived. I didn't answer the first time, or the second, but on the third, something in me softened. I suppose I wanted to hear his voice. Or maybe I just needed to know if there was anything left of the boy I'd raised. When I picked up, he sounded like a man unraveling. Mom, he said, his voice low, strained. We're at the Gardenway Inn. Just for now. Please don't do this yet. You had 10 days, I said. That wasn't just legal advice. It was mercy. "She's not thinking straight," he said. "She thought the money would come back faster." "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. $620,000 gone, and the only thing you're worried about is her schedule. There was silence on the line. Then a sound, his exhale shaky. "I didn't know it would get this bad," he finally said. "That's the problem, Eamon. You didn't know, and you didn't ask. You watched it happen." "She said it was temporary," he whispered. "The boutique, the investors, the rest." I believed her. I didn't respond. "Mom," he said again, "we just need time. We need a reset." "You need accountability," I said. And that letter was the first step. "She's talking about suing you for harassment," he said. "Defamation, elder abuse. She says you've always hated her." "Then let her sue," I said, calmly. "I have receipts, signatures, recordings. Let her drag it all into court. I'm ready." "She's not." He said more to himself than to me. "Then you have a choice," I said. "You can stay attached to her mess, or you can start digging yourself out." He didn't answer. I waited, and then soft, almost like a child again, he said, "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not a question I can answer anymore." I heard the motel TV in the background, low, tinny voices drifting through. Lennox yelled something muffled by the door. Eamon flinched audibly, the sound in his breath changing. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry for all of it." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard in years, but I didn't know if it came from guilt or from fear of losing shelter. I hung up without another word. 2 hours later, Lennox texted me directly. "You'll regret this. You'll be the one with no family. Enjoy your quiet little life." I stared at the message for a moment, then forwarded it to James. No commentary. He responded within minutes. "Thanks. Documented." I made a fresh cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and listened to the sound of nothing. 3 days passed. Then a knock at the door came just after sunrise. Firm, familiar, deliberate. The knock wasn't Eamon, and it wasn't Lennox. It was Marcus Greer, the private investigator James had brought on retainer when things started to smell wrong. He didn't say much, just handed me a slim folder, nodded once, and walked back to his car. Inside were screenshots, documents, and a printed report. I read it all twice before I spoke a word. There was no boutique. Not legally. The store Lennox flaunted online, white walls, curated shelves. Flattering light was staged inside a short-term rental in downtown Bend. She booked it once a week for photo days. The address listed on her social media profile traced back to a mailbox at a UPS store. There was no business license registered under her name, no tax filings, no state or city permits. The website was a template, her products listed as sold out indefinitely. She'd funneled nearly $300,000 into a brand that didn't exist. Inventory came from overseas discount sites. Product images were lifted from other designers. Even the testimonials on her website were fake names stolen from wedding registries and Yelp reviews of restaurants she'd never been to. Every post, every story, every caption about scaling the business was theater. She wasn't an entrepreneur. She was a liar, playing one for an audience that never asked questions. I placed the papers on my dining table and stepped back, staring at them like they might rearrange themselves into something more innocent. But facts don't blink. I pulled out the loan agreement again. The clause James added in pen still held any default resulting from willful misrepresentation may include an additional 20% penalty at the lender's discretion. I had every right to enforce it now. I took a deep breath, then pulled out my phone. There were 5 unread texts from Lennox, 1 from Eamon. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I took a photo of the fake boutique address and sent it to James with the caption, "Use this." He replied 5 minutes later, "Already filed for a fraud claim. We'll tie it into the suit." I spent the rest of the day gathering copies of everything, printouts, backups, a separate folder just for screenshots of her posts. James had warned me not everything holds weight in court, but it all tells a story. And this story was rotting from the inside. By nightfall, I couldn't decide if I felt relieved or sick. Maybe both. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the lie. It was the effort she'd poured into faking success. Instead of building a real life, she didn't want help. She wanted applause. And when I stopped clapping, she turned on me. The next morning, I woke to another email from James. Short, direct. I found something else. The call came at 10:47 p.m., a number I didn't recognize, and I almost let it ring out. But something in my gut told me to answer. Callista. The voice was quiet, uncertain. This is Marjorie, Lennox's sister. I hadn't heard her voice in over a year. She rarely came around, and when she did, she floated through holidays like a shadow, watchful, polite, always a little removed. I remembered her once telling me she worked nights. That was the excuse anyway. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know I shouldn't. But I thought, you should hear it from someone who's not on her payroll." I sat down slowly. "Hear what she's been bragging," Marjorie said. "To her friends, to some guy she's seeing about how she's going to take your house." I didn't speak. I let her keep going. "She said the boutique was just a warm-up. That you're guilt-ridden and predictable," her words. "That after the slap you'd fold. That Eamon would make you feel bad enough to let them move in." "She was wrong," I said. "I know that now," Marjorie said. But she didn't think she was. "She told me last month, if I push hard enough, Callista will cave. She always does. I'll get the house, and Eamon can thank me later." My stomach turned not with shock, but with something colder. Confirmation. I wanted to believe she was just venting. Marjorie continued. "But she's been saying it for weeks. She told a friend at some rooftop party that you were sitting on dead equity and didn't deserve to live alone in a 3-bedroom home." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "She said that she said worse. That if you didn't give it willingly, she'd take you to court. Emotional instability, elder pressure, whatever she could build. She's already pulled some paperwork off public record. She thinks she can twist it." I rubbed my forehead, already picturing her sifting through city records like a predator casing a quiet block. "She's not well, Callista," Marjorie said. "She's been unraveling for a long time. I tried to talk her out of the house sale. She said you'd never see a penny of it anyway." I closed my eyes. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because she's not just hurting you," she said. "She's dragging everyone down. And Eamon, he's not strong enough to stop her. But maybe you are." Her voice cracked a little on that last sentence. Not performative, just tired. "Thank you for calling," I said. And I meant it. She exhaled, like she'd been holding that breath for hours. "Be careful, Callista." I hung up, set the phone down, and stood in the dark for a long while, staring at the corners of my home. The photos, the lamp, the kitchen counter where Eamon used to sneak cookies before dinner. All of it suddenly felt less like furniture and more like evidence. She didn't just want my silence. She wanted the deed. I walked into the guest room, opened the fireproof lockbox under the bed, and pulled out the original title to my house. I placed it on the table beside James's growing file. Then I called the locksmith. James didn't like surprises, but he handled them with precision. He called early, his tone clipped formal. "I need you to come in. Today." When I arrived, he slid a second folder across his desk, thicker than the others, marked with a small green tab in the corner. Receipts, hotel records, wire transfers, all tied to a man named Richard Hawthorne. I opened it and immediately recognized the name. I'd heard it once in passing. A name Lennox dropped casually during dinner at their old house. "Richard says the market's about to pivot," she'd said. Eamon hadn't blinked. James leaned forward. "He's an investor, married, 3 kids, lives in Portland, and he's been funding Lennox. I kept flipping photos of Lennox in a hotel bar, hand on Richard's knee. Credit card statements. 2 flights to Palm Springs, 1 to Aspen. Rooms booked under alias names, but always billed to the same private card. She told the bank she was self-funded, James said. But all the boutique's expenses trace back to him. Wire transfers every 2 weeks. Between them, over $150,000. I stared at the papers, the dates lined up like tombstones. One of the trips had happened a week before they showed up at my door. She said the business was struggling, I said quietly. It was never a business, James replied. It was a cover, and he was the bankroll. I found a hotel receipt from downtown Seattle penthouse suite, 4 nights. It was dated the same weekend I hosted a barbecue. Eamon had told me Lennox was visiting her sister. I couldn't stop the laugh that broke from my chest, short, bitter. I gave them $45,000 to build a life, I said, and she used it to impress her affair. James didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I looked at the photos again, not to torture myself, but to understand. She didn't look secretive. She looked proud. Like she was exactly where she belonged, spending someone else's money, basking in attention that didn't cost her anything, because someone else always paid. I want it all in the file, I said. It already is, James said. We've subpoenaed the boutique's financial trail. If she claims it was her money, we'll prove it wasn't. And if Mr. Hawthorne tries to deny involvement, we have 6 hotel security logs, 5 surveillance captures, and 2 receipts with his personal signature. I nodded slowly. What about Eamon? James sighed. He may be in denial, but he's not blind. This could push him over. I stood, folder in hand. Let it. Back home, I made another copy and slid it into my lockbox behind the title to my house. I felt no impulse to confront her. Not yet. Let the silence stretch. Let her believe she still had leverage. That night, I received a message from Eamon. Did you send a lawyer to Richard's house? I didn't reply. He followed with another, you're going too far. But I wasn't. I was just catching up. The next morning, I opened the front door to find a delivery envelope on my welcome mat, no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note written in tight block letters. You'll want to hear this. I hadn't used the porch camera in over a year. It was one of those things I installed after a neighbor's package got stolen, then mostly forgot about. I figured the batteries were long dead or the software outdated. But when I plugged the USB into my laptop, the screen lit up, date-stamped, high definition, and complete. There it was. The moment Lennox stepped into my kitchen, her voice rising, her hand flying. I didn't realize how loud the slap had been until I heard it on playback. She didn't just hit me, she meant it to land. Meant for it to be seen. Eamon stood behind her, frozen still, holding his bag. His face was pale. He didn't move, didn't speak. But the microphone picked up everything. Every word. Every insult. Every threat. I will get this house, she said. You're just a speed bump. She'd said it with her back to the door, not knowing the camera above the frame caught the entire thing from the moment they walked in to the second they stormed out. I watched it twice, then emailed the full file to James. He called 20 minutes later. This changes things, he said. This is direct proof of assault, intimidation, and motive. She didn't just lash out, she laid out intent. I said nothing. I already knew. She can't spin this in court, he added. And if she tries to countersue, this footage buries her. I opened the folder where I'd been collecting everything. Loan documents, text messages, business records, Marjorie's notes, Hawthorne's receipts. I dragged the video file in and labeled it Exhibit A. Then I made 3 backups, 2 encrypted ones stored offline. It wasn't about revenge. It was about being prepared. I played the video again, not to punish myself, but to make peace with the truth of it. There was no mistaking her face in that moment. Not surprise. Not regret. Just entitlement. like my refusal was an inconvenience in her plan. She didn't just want to win, she expected to. That night, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat on the porch with my notebook. The lights from across the street were dim, but Mrs. Rowan's silhouette moved in the kitchen window. She hadn't said anything since the day it happened, but I'd seen her watching. I added her name to my list. Possible witness. Present during incident. Heard raised voices. Likely saw the aftermath. The law isn't always about justice, but sometimes when you prepare carefully, it comes close enough. The next morning, James called again. His tone was sharper. "We have a problem," he said. "Lennox just filed a countersuit." I didn't answer when Eamon called again. I didn't listen to the voicemail Lennox left either, though I saw the transcript preview. "You're not who I thought you were." She never said that when I cooked for them. When I paid their mortgage that first winter they struggled. When I sat quietly at Thanksgiving tucked in the corner without a plate. Back then I was convenient, predictable, quiet. Now I wasn't. And suddenly I was unrecognizable. James emailed me the countersuit, 5 pages of noise. Emotional distress. Defamation. Elder harassment. A woman I had fed and housed was now claiming I had created a hostile environment by enforcing a signed legal agreement. She painted herself as the victim called my behavior. Aggressive said I'd damaged her reputation and threatened her personal brand. I read it once, then again. I didn't flinch. Instead, I printed out the document, attached it to my existing case folder, and placed the USB footage gently on top. I labeled the entire packet Supplemental Evidence, Fen vs. Vale. Then I drove to the courthouse. No dramatics, no calls to Eamon. I didn't post. I didn't reply. I didn't warn. The clerk stamped the restraining order request. I filed it under assault backed by security footage, time-stamped and verified. I submitted an affidavit outlining the incident, the threats, the financial coercion, and the pattern of escalation. I noted Lennox's recent texts, screenshotted, dated, and filed. The clerk read through my paperwork, then looked up and said, "Do you want emergency status?" "Yes." She slid the folder into a red sleeve and walked it to the window. It was done before lunch. When I stepped outside, the sky had turned overcast and the air smelled like rain. I didn't drive straight home. I stopped at the post office and mailed James an original copy of everything registered return receipt requested. I walked the long way back to the car. Back home, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Eamon. "You filed a restraining order." Still, I didn't reply. Let them wonder. Let them scramble. Silence when sharp enough cuts, cleaner than any accusation. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and reopened the file. I added the public court docket number to the cover page. Then I added a sticky note. "Do not engage. Let the system work." James called just after 5 p.m. "She doesn't know about the footage yet," he said. "Let her push forward with the countersuit. The more she tries to bluff, the harder she'll fall when the file goes public. She always liked attention," I said. "Let her have some." He chuckled once low and short. "I'll notify opposing counsel tomorrow. The slap footage becomes part of the public record at noon." "Good," I said. I turned off my phone, poured one last cup of coffee, and watched the dusk settle over my porch. Some people make noise when they're wounded. Me, I file. I wait. And I let the quiet do its work. The email from James came in the middle of the afternoon. Subject, filed. Attached was a scanned copy of the divorce petition. Eamon's name, Lennox's name, date, filing number. Nothing elaborate, just a man formally, finally choosing to separate himself from the wreckage he helped build. James had a short note beneath the scan. He filed this morning, alone. I stared at the page for a long while. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt still. He hadn't warned me, hadn't asked for advice, hadn't sent a message. But something inside him must have cracked wide enough to let daylight in. By evening, the fallout had started. My landline rang first rare these days. I let it go to voicemail. Then the text came from an unknown number. You're a roach. Crawling under everything. You ruined my empire. Lennox. I didn't respond. But I saved the message, tagged it, and forwarded it to James for documentation. A few minutes later, my neighbor Mrs. Rowan texted me. There's a woman screaming outside in heels. She just threw something at your fence. I didn't go out. I didn't open the door. I didn't look through the window. I just turned the volume on the porch camera back on and let it do what it was designed to do. The next morning, James confirmed it. She showed up at the county clerk's office, he said. Tried to dispute the filing, said it was forged. Eamon was still there. He didn't back down. What did she do? She broke his phone on the floor and called you a parasite, loud enough for 2 paralegals and a deputy to hear. I exhaled slowly. Then it's done. Not quite, he said. But it started. I folded the printed divorce petition in thirds and slid it into my binder behind the loan documents. A strange calm washed over me. For the first time, I wasn't the one trying to hold the family together. I wasn't mediating, apologizing, smoothing things over. I was watching the pieces fall exactly where they belonged. The silence held for a full day. Then just after noon, James called again. She's lawyered up, he said. Countersuits growing teeth. She's trying to drag your name through state records. Claims you interfered in a business contract. I nodded, already expecting it. What's our next move? His tone didn't waver. We let her talk. And then we show them what she never expected anyone to see. The countersuit was a performance from the first line. James slid the packet across his desk like it was a menu I didn't need to read twice. 27 pages of exaggerated language and weaponized victimhood, emotional distress, defamation, coercive control of a vulnerable marriage, and then the one that made him laugh out loud, elder harassment. That one's rich, he said, tapping the margin. She's accusing you of using your age as a shield to bully her. Claims she lived in fear of retaliation every time she visited your home. She was the one slamming doors, I said, and plates, and my front gate. She says you created an environment of emotional manipulation, that you fabricated the assault footage and tampered with legal documents. He slid a small slip of paper out from beneath the file, and her lawyer is Miles Denver. The name landed hard. Denver wasn't just expensive. He was strategic, ruthless, and fond of flashy language that played well in headlines. He wasn't a courtroom grinder, he was a media architect. The kind of lawyer you hired, not because you were innocent, but because you were loud. She's not trying to win in court, James said. She's trying to win in public, or at least scare you out of going forward. I looked over the stack of claims again, one by one, each more distorted than the last. According to Lennox, I'd been stalking her online, contacting her vendors, harassing her friends, and weaponizing outdated familial expectations to discredit her brand. What brand? I muttered. Exactly, James said. The last page listed damages $125 million. I laughed. It came out dry and sharp, startling even myself. She knows she can't win, I said. Of course, James replied. But she's betting you'll blink first, that you'll settle just to make it stop. He waited a moment, then asked, Are you going to? I shook my head. No. Good, he said. Because she made one mistake. He pulled out a smaller folder, thinner but heavier. She gave us access during discovery, he continued. And we found what she didn't scrub: metadata emails, internal memos, messages between her and Hawthorne, and most importantly, bank statements she thought we wouldn't connect. He laid out 2 sheets side by side. Wire transfers, timestamps. One from Lennox's joint account with Eamon, one to an LLC controlled by Hawthorne. Both dated the week she filed the countersuit. She filed a lawsuit for emotional distress, James said, on the same day she booked a penthouse in Seattle with her investor. I stared at the proof plain as day. Let her drag this into the spotlight, I said. I hope she brings the whole city. James nodded. Once then slid everything back into the folder. We'll file our full response tomorrow, including the footage, including the fraud trail, including testimony from Marjorie and Mrs. Rowan, if she agrees to speak. She will, I said. James leaned back in his chair. She's going to walk into court thinking this is still her stage. I stood up. And she's going to learn what silence sounds like when it has teeth. As I left the office, the clouds had started to shift. Not clear skies, not yet, but lighter. The kind of sky you see just before something breaks. She wore ivory, not white. Lennox was never that obvious, but a soft ivory blouse with gold buttons and a matching pencil skirt. Her hair pulled back understated makeup and that same controlled smile she used to wear when Eamon's friends were around. Measured elegance, poised victimhood. She looked like someone whose truth was being stolen from her. The courtroom was small. No press, no jury, just the judge, 2 attorneys, and a row of seats meant for family no one invited. Eamon sat behind me silent. He didn't say a word when I entered. Didn't even meet my eyes. But he stayed. Lennox took the stand first. Her voice trembled perfectly. She dabbed the corner of her eye with a handkerchief when she spoke about the psychological pressure of marrying into a family with outdated values. She said, I used guilt as a tool. That I demanded obedience through financial manipulation. That I weaponized motherhood to control proximity and housing. James didn't interrupt. He let her talk. Let her dig. Then it was our turn. James stood slowly. No papers. Just the small click of his pen against his notepad. Ms. Vale, he began. Did you tell the court today that my client threatened you? Yes, she said. Repeatedly. Did she threaten you on April 3rd of this year? I believe that was the day she raised her voice and implied I was ungrateful. And did you strike her that day? She blinked. Absolutely not. He paused, turned toward the judge, and held up a small USB. Your Honor, may I submit video evidence? The judge nodded. James crossed to the projector without fanfare, inserted the drive, and let the screen come alive. There it was, me in the kitchen. Lennox stepping forward, yelling the slap, echoing like a gunshot, her voice cutting through the air. I will get this house. Eamon looked down. The courtroom was silent. When the video ended, James walked back to his table, calm and unshaken. No further questions. Your Honor, Lennox's attorney scrambled, asked about context, emotional state, accused me of editing the footage. James calmly handed over the metadata report. Time-stamped. Verified. Chain of custody intact. Then he presented the second exhibit, Richard Hawthorne's financial statements. Wire transfers. Hotel bookings. Boutique payments from an account that was never hers. The judge scanned them silently. Lennox's voice cracked. She said it wasn't what it looked like. She said the man was just a friend. Then she said the business was legitimate, just not profitable. Then she said the money came from her own efforts, consulting fees. Each excuse crumbled faster than the last. By the time she stepped down, her blouse was creased, her hair no longer perfect. The performance had ended. James rested his case with 3 lines. We've heard the truth. We've seen the evidence. The plaintiff came for shelter. My client offered help. And now she stands accused for simply asking to be repaid. The judge didn't speak for a long moment. Then he dismissed court for the day. As we walked out, Eamon followed behind me. Still quiet. Still unsure. Outside, the sky had turned pale, almost colorless. The kind of light that settles after something has been exposed. Tomorrow, the ruling would come, but the real verdict had already passed. The courtroom was quiet when the judge returned. No rustle of papers, no whispers. Even Lennox stayed still, eyes fixed on a spot above his head, like if she looked anywhere else she'd come apart. I didn't glance at her. I didn't need to. I had James beside me. I had the folder in front of me. I had the truth printed and filed and undeniable. And now I had time on my side. The judge cleared his throat and began reading. His tone wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. He called Lennox's countersuit baseless and intentionally misleading. Said the court found no merit in her emotional distress claim, and that the video evidence along with the financial records painted a concerning pattern of manipulation and misrepresentation. When he awarded me the full repayment of the original loan with interest, it felt less like a victory and more like a restoration. $45,000, plus $17,900 in interest, plus $8,000 in legal fees. Then came the pause. He adjusted his glasses, glanced toward Lennox's side of the courtroom, and continued. The court finds additional cause to grant further investigation into boutique-related fraud and the misuse of investor funds presented as business capital. All materials submitted will be forwarded to the State Fraud Unit. Lennox stiffened. And he added any income reported under Ms. Vale's current or future self-employment will be subject to garnishment until the debt is satisfied. James didn't blink. I didn't smile. There was no celebration, just a slow, quiet wave of release. It was over. At least the part that belonged to me. The judge dismissed the case. Court adjourned. Lennox stood rigid. Her attorney whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. Her jaw was locked, her hands clenched. And when she turned to leave, she didn't look at me once. Eamon, still seated, finally spoke. "I'll send what I can," he said low enough that only I could hear. "Monthly, until it's covered." I didn't answer. I just nodded once, not out of forgiveness, but out of finality. James and I left the courthouse side by side. The doors closed behind us like the last page of a book, clean and simple. Outside, I pulled in a deep breath. The air felt new, not lighter exactly, but clearer, unclouded. I didn't call anyone. I didn't announce anything. I just went home, took off my shoes, and poured myself a cup of coffee. There were no balloons, no headlines, no applause, but there was something better. Stillness. And the knowledge that every piece of paper in that folder had done exactly what it was meant to do. And I wasn't finished. The envelope was plain. No return address. My name written in Eamon's handwriting, still the same careful print from when he was 10 and trying to spell out Happy Mother's Day with a pencil too small for his hand. I let it sit on the table for nearly an hour before I opened it. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because I needed to be ready to hear it. Inside, one sheet of lined paper, folded twice. A note not long, not defensive, not full of excuses. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not writing to explain. I'm writing to acknowledge what I let happen." I watched her twist the story. I let her speak for both of us. I ignored the voice in my head, the one that sounded like you, because I didn't want to admit I'd married someone who never saw you as a person. I let her call you names. I let her slap you. I let her steal from you. And I said nothing. I told myself I was keeping peace, that it was better to stay quiet than start a war. But the truth is, I was afraid. Of conflict. Of losing her. Of facing what I'd become. You gave me everything. You worked late nights, skipped vacations, stretched every dollar. I never lacked for anything except the courage to protect the person who protected me. I know a letter isn't enough. I know this comes too late, but I've started a new account. I'll deposit what I can each month. It won't undo what I let happen, but it will be a start. If you never respond, I understand. But I needed to say this while I still had the right to call you Mom, even if only on paper. Eamon. I sat with the letter in my hands for a long time. No tears, no anger, just the dull ache of something long overdue finally arriving. He wasn't wrong. It didn't fix anything. It didn't rewrite the months of silence, the years of erosion. but it was his voice. Alone, unedited, without Lennox holding the strings. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the back of the binder behind the legal documents behind the receipts and court rulings. It didn't belong in the evidence pile. It wasn't a weapon or a shield. It was what was left when everything else had burned away. That night, I lit a fire in the small backyard pit and sat alone, wrapped in the sweater my mother once knitted for me. Eamon had lost his voice for years, and when he finally used it, it arrived too late to be comfort, but just in time to be closure. Still, something told me this story wasn't quite finished. The next morning, the phone rang. It wasn't Eamon, and it wasn't Lennox. It was Marjorie. The guest room had always been a holding place for visiting friends' holidays, the son who said he'd come for a long weekend and stayed for 6 months. For their boxes, their coats, their arguments, their plans. Now, it was mine. I cleared it out slowly. Not out of sadness, but with something like ceremony. Every drawer, every corner. The closet still held one of Eamon's old flannel shirts, the kind he stopped wearing when Lennox started dressing him. I folded it gently and packed it in the donation bag. The mattress was replaced. The walls repainted no more beige. I picked a warm gray that softened in the evening light. I moved in a small bookshelf. A reading lamp. A chair I'd always loved but never had space for. The desk from the attic. Fresh linens. No clutter. No apology. I started sleeping there on purpose. Not because my room held bad memories, but because this one held none. A blank page. In the mornings, I brewed coffee strong and black. The kind I liked. No one to ask for milk. No one to wrinkle their nose and say it was too bitter. I made toast. I opened the windows. I let the breeze move through the house without permission. Mrs. Rowan came by on Saturdays now. She brought her little dog and we'd sit on the porch in the quiet talking about everything but the past. One Sunday, I hosted 2 neighbors from down the street for a brunch I didn't plan weeks in advance. They brought muffins. I made scrambled eggs. No centerpieces. No performance. The house stayed quiet. But not empty. People came and went, not because they needed something, but because they were welcome. Sometimes I caught myself pausing at the front door expecting to hear voices. Chaos. Demands. Instead, I heard wind through the trees. The low hum of the fridge. My own footsteps on wood floors I no longer tiptoed across. I didn't fill the silence with music. I let it stay. The loan repayment began. Small deposits. Eamon never sent notes with them. Just numbers always on the first of the month. And I never replied. There wasn't a need. What was left between us couldn't be fixed with more words. But it could be acknowledged. I updated my will. Redrafted the terms of the house. Listed specific instructions for who would get what and who would get nothing. It felt final. And then came the call. Marjorie voiced taut, uneasy. I thought you should know, she said. Lennox left town. I didn't speak, just waited. She's in Utah now, with someone new, another man, widowed, older. He owns 3 properties and walks with a cane. I closed my eyes. She's doing it again, Marjorie said. Same pattern, same lines. She told him she was ruined by a jealous ex-mother-in-law. She said you tried to sue her out of spite. And he believed her, I think so. But he has a daughter, mid-30s, protective. I figured you might want to warn her. I stood in the kitchen, the light slanting through the blinds in stripes. I need her name, I said. Marjorie hesitated, then gave it to me. I grabbed a fresh envelope and walked to the guest room. This wasn't for me anymore. This time, it was for someone else. Marjorie showed up with no warning. I heard the knock before I saw her 3 quick raps, no hesitation. I opened the door to find her on my porch, hair pinned back dark circles under her eyes, and a manila envelope clutched to her chest like it might explode if she let it go. "She's doing it again," she said. No hello, no small talk. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at the kitchen table where so much had unraveled and been stitched back together. She laid the envelope down and opened it slowly, like she still wasn't sure if coming here was the right move. She's using a different name now. L. Emerson. Says it's for branding. I found her profile on a senior matchmaking site. She listed herself as a wellness consultant and widow. Claimed she lost everything after a legal attack from a hostile family member. She called herself a widow, I asked. Marjorie nodded. Claims Eamon died in a car crash. She even listed a fake obituary used an AI-generated photo. I cross-checked it. And the new target Dale Anderson, she said. 73. Retired chemist. Wife passed 2 years ago. Lives in Cedar Hills with his daughter Camille. Camille's skeptical. She's the reason I found out. Marjorie passed me a printed screenshot. Lennox L. Emerson smiling beside a man with graying hair and gentle eyes. Her hand rested on his chest. A diamond on her finger. She's already moved in, Marjorie said. She's pitching him on investing in a wellness retreat in Park City. I stared at the photo. Same smile, same performance, different stage. She's changed her last name legally, Marjorie said. Filed it after the trial. Left the state. Started a clean slate with money she didn't earn and a man who doesn't know what she is. She's escalating, I said quietly. She thinks no one's watching now, Marjorie replied. I reached across the table and pulled the envelope toward me. Inside were articles, screenshots, court documents from my own case. Even copies of the boutique's fake registry and the hotel invoices with Hawthorne's name. I've already emailed some of it to Camille, Marjorie said. But she hasn't replied. I think she's scared. I would be too. I nodded. She needs more than a warning. She needs proof. Marjorie leaned back in her chair. I came to ask for help. I know you don't owe me anything, but I think you're the only one who can stop her before she does worse. I stared at the photo again. She'd found another man with grief written on his face and a house full of silence. She'd slid herself in like a cure offering warmth where there was absence. And I knew without question, she'd already mapped out what she planned to take from him. She chose someone whose daughter doesn't scare her, I said. She should have, Marjorie replied. I stood, pulled out my phone, and opened the folder. I thought I'd never need again. The trial transcript, the video, the notarized documents. I started organizing it into a new packet. She's not the only one who knows how to start over, I said. Marjorie watched me for a moment, then exhaled with something like relief. I'll get the contact info for Camille. She may not be ready to talk, but she'll read something if it's printed. I nodded once, and she stood to leave. I'm sorry it had to be you, she said at the door. I didn't respond. I just turned toward the printer and started preparing the file. I used the same binder. Not out of nostalgia, but out of practicality. It was sturdy zippered and held everything in place, just like it had for me when I needed it to speak louder than I could. This time, it wasn't for court. It was for Camille. I printed everything. No emotion, no commentary. Just the truth. Page 1, a copy of the promissory note Lennox had signed in my kitchen 3 years ago. Then the certified letter, the court filings, screenshots of the slap, the transcript from the trial, her fraudulent business filings, the email exchanges with Richard Hawthorne, the wire transfers, the final judgment in bold debt owed in full, damages awarded, garnishment approved. I kept it chronological simple. The story told itself, but I didn't stop there. I added a brief summary typed, printed, stapled to the inside cover. Not dramatic, just the facts. Dear Camille, you don't know me, but your father is engaged to a woman I once called family. Her name is Lennox Vale. She now goes by L. Emerson. She has a history of deception, financial fraud, and violence. This isn't a warning out of bitterness. It's a record of what's already happened, a pattern, documented, repeated, denied. You don't owe me a response. You don't owe anyone disbelief. You owe your father protection. This file contains everything you'll need if the time comes. I hope it never does. Callista Fenn. I slid it into a manila envelope padded with Camille's name, handwritten on the front. I drove to the post office just after lunch. Quiet day. No line. I paid for overnight delivery signature required. The clerk asked if I wanted tracking. I said yes. Then I walked back to my car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at the receipt for a long while. It felt different this time. Not like a strike, but like passing a torch. Because this wasn't revenge. It wasn't about reclaiming money or clearing my name. It was about making sure no one else sat in their own kitchen trying to explain to themselves why silence had felt like safety. On the way home, I passed the coffee shop where I used to meet Eamon on Saturdays. He hadn't reached out since the divorce was finalized. The deposit still came on time, quiet, unaccompanied by any note. But there was nothing else. No phone calls. No messages. I didn't miss the noise. Back at home, I tucked the tracking receipt into my drawer and turned off my phone. The house was still. The wind moved through the windows, lifting the edge of the curtain just enough to remind me the world hadn't stopped moving. I poured 1 cup of coffee and sat by the window binder, finally off the table, inbox, finally empty. That evening, I received a single text from Marjorie. She doesn't know yet, but Camille signed for it. I closed the message, took one last sip, and set the mug down. The binder was no longer mine, and neither was the weight that came with it. The porch was warm that morning. Sunlight stretched over the railing, touched the edge of the table, and stopped just short of my cup. I'd brewed it strong black bitter the way I liked it, before I ever learned to tone myself down for other people's comfort. I sat quietly, listening to the quiet hum of the street bikes, rolling by, sprinklers ticking on somewhere down the block, a bird nesting above the mailbox. Then the mail truck rolled in. I didn't expect much. The usual coupons, a few bills, maybe another real estate flyer offering to unlock the equity in my home. I almost didn't see the letter tucked behind the water bill white envelope, no return address, just my name. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a printed transaction slip, a bank transfer. $500 Eamon's name, the date, and a reference code with the words first payment, loan repayment, no handwritten note, no apology. Just the money, a start. I folded the slip once, clean and neat, and tucked it into the back of the binder I'd thought I was done using. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just smiled, small, real, unperformed. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about acknowledgement. Not from the court. Not from the neighbors. But from him. He didn't call. I didn't expect him to. I didn't need him to. Some bridges don't burn all at once. They smolder for years. And some mornings, when the smoke finally clears, you find something small, still standing, quiet, unfamiliar, but honest. The mug warmed my palms. I took a slow sip and watched a single car pass on the far end of the street. My house was quiet now. My name was clean. And my silence was finally my own, chosen, not forced. I didn't tell anyone about the transfer. Not Marjorie. Not James. Not even Mrs. Rowan, who would have raised an eyebrow and asked if that meant he was coming home. He wasn't, but I was still here. I glanced toward the guest room window. The curtains were pulled back slightly, letting light spill over the bookshelf. A fresh set of sheets lay folded on the end of the bed, just in case someone decent ever needed it again. The binder sat on the table behind me, unzipped, now loose, lived in. It wasn't a weapon anymore, just a record of what I'd survived, of what I'd reclaimed. I looked out over the porch. The trees swayed quiet and slow, like they had all the time in the world. I poured the last of the coffee into my cup, still hot, still strong, and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to explain anything to anyone. Not who I was, not what I'd done, not what it cost me to get here. And in that silence, I finally heard something I hadn't heard in years. My own breath steady, my name untouched, my life unborrowed.